Good morning, everybody. This is a live forecast model discussion with a tornado outbreak possible today across northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, a large swath of Tennessee as well, possibly into far southern Kentucky. But look at these flash flood warnings that are happening so far this morning across a large swath of Kentucky. This is the storm total rainfall here. The reds are 4 to 5, even 6 inches in spots, and that includes locations like Pikeville, Martin, Annville, Boonville, Sand Gap, Mount Vernon, south of the Berea area there, back toward Glasgow, east of Bowling Green, but definitely a lot of flash flood warnings so far this morning. And that's as that low-level jet is just slamming up against that warm front. And you basically get elevated storms moving from west-southwest to east-northeast across this same corridor, and definitely has created dangerous, even life-threatening flash flooding. And this is going to continue through the day today with possibly even more precipitation. The good news is that at least that convective line has settled just a little bit to the south of those areas that have been hammered so far down to the south of those flash flood warnings. But another round is organizing off to the west, Columbia, back towards Science Hill, Annville, Mount Vernon. So definitely just to the east of where a lot of those tornadoes tracked. The EF3 tornado there in Bowling Green as well certainly was a very tragic event there on December 10 and 11. And I know that I've mentioned that there are a lot of similarities with this setup meteorologically in the trough ejection, but every single event plays out very differently, even if you do have very similar shapes to the trough ejection, just subtle differences. Like, for example, that subtropical ridge extending a little bit further west in the Gulf of Mexico can completely change the shape of the entire warm sector. And this one is timed a little bit differently as well. Different areas appear that they could be impacted. This is the 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity at 0Z. So let's step this back. And I'm starting right with the HRRR. We probably should start with a surface map, but I want to start right here with the 0 to 1 kilometer shear, because that captures that low-level shear that is so critical for tornadoes to happen. You can see this front back behind it that is oriented northeast to the southwesterly direction, and the favorable low-level shear for those tornadoes basically from northern Mississippi, especially northern Alabama, into middle and eastern Tennessee, all the way up into eastern Kentucky later on today, as a surface low is going to be migrating up this boundary southwest to northeast. And as it moves off to the northeast, these prefrontal confluence bands will develop. Will those confluence bands convect? That's the big question. That's why the Storm Prediction Center has kept an enhanced risk for this event rather than an upgrade to a moderate risk. But the 12Z HRRR sure does show an abundance of convection along those prefrontal confluence lines right within that corridor of the greatest wind shear here from northeastern Mississippi across northern Alabama up into middle Tennessee, even eastern Tennessee. And you can see these renegades moving into eastern Kentucky as well, to the south of where those flash flood warnings are in effect. But I do expect these storms to continue training over the same areas there in central Kentucky, bringing with it that tornado threat. So this is 21Z at 3 p.m. I expect the main dominant mode of tornadic supercells to initiate across northern Mississippi, maybe 1 or 2 p.m., and those will move off to the northeast throughout this corridor and continue to develop down along that prefrontal confluence line until that low pressure center moves by, and that should help to veer out some of that wind shear. But these supercells are going to be tracking over northern, northwestern Alabama, eventually into central, middle Tennessee, southeastern Tennessee, and eastern Kentucky. And you can see this low-level jet that these storms, especially those prefrontal renegades, are embedded within. You've got an axis of about 50 to 60 knots here, low-level jet. And even though the low-level winds are relatively unidirectional, that's just kind of how these events go. And you can definitely see a hint at this prefrontal confluence line. Winds a bit more southwesterly to the west of it, a bit more southerly to the east of it, and that includes northwestern, northern Alabama. So there even is a bit of directional shear as this surface low migrates up that front. And just ahead of that front, there also could be some of those renegade storms just ahead of that surface low across eastern, southeastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, and a little bit further down the line as well. One of these great composite indices to examine the environments most favorable for tornadoes to try to find where the surface-based instability coincides with that strongest low-level shear. And you could definitely see these storms are going to move right along that pipe of surface-based instability and stronger low-level wind shear. These little tracks here represent those confluence lines and bands of supercell storms that may form. And it looks like they're going to form right about in here, right near that I-55 corridor in northeastern Mississippi, and then race right up this environment, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, up into middle Tennessee. And that environment by 0Z, the low-level jet begins to compress. And the instability axis especially gets pinched basically eastern Tennessee down into Alabama. Still, though, that surface-based instability all the way up into eastern Kentucky. So if storms do evolve into that environment during the overnight hours, they certainly will have tornado potential as well. And it does look like the HRRR model builds those storms all the way down close to the Tuscaloosa, Birmingham area, bands of supercell storms evolving across northern Alabama into eastern Tennessee. So the runs of the HRRR certainly seem to be trending toward more abundant convection, more abundant renegade storms here. I'll likely be tracking these from northwestern Alabama up into south central Tennessee, eventually into eastern Tennessee. Maybe I'll work the snow on the backside as it moves through the higher terrain here near the Smoky Mountains. Then I'll drop back down to make sure that Gizmo is doing good. 2 hours here going to 8 p.m. in the evening. And then these supercells finally start to move off to the northeast. So it doesn't look like it is going to be one that this outbreak is going to extend it too far to the south into central and southern Mississippi and Alabama. Looks like that ejecting wave is flattening out a little bit over top of that anticyclone. But these are going to be dangerous storms moving up into the Appalachians, the southern Appalachians, possibly having tornadoes on the ground here, areas like Chattanooga back into northwestern Georgia. This is going to be your dangerous mode of storms that basically evolves from northeastern Mississippi across northwestern Alabama to south central Tennessee. Then another mode will develop, another mode, and then eventually they'll get shut down by some dry air that's wrapping around the south side and the loss of that daytime heating. But then a squall line comes through with a little bit less favorable wind shear, but you could certainly have some embedded circulations in there, even as that wind shear begins to veer and becomes more front parallel. Possibly some embedded circulations in the middle of the night as that squall line comes through here. But probably just some gusty winds with that event. The main event by this time is over the southern Appalachians, lifting off to the northeast. And by tomorrow afternoon on the 2nd, that convective line is all the way down by the coast, coastal Carolina. Potential band of winter weather then on the backside moving through Tennessee. So those areas that are currently getting flash flood warnings down into middle Tennessee and then are probably going to see tornado warnings as well throughout this event. You can see that little band of snow on the backside through middle Tennessee, up into central Kentucky, all the way up into southern Ohio. And that's going to continue moving off to the east. I'll try to intercept that snow as well within the Appalachians here. Looks like Sunday night. What day is today anyway? Today's Saturday? So I'm thinking that this precipitation, pretty decent shot of snow here over the higher terrain, Smoky Mountains, Appalachians, southern Appalachians there as well. That's the HRRR. Surface low down into middle Carolina, and on the backside, this could be a pretty good snow event for the southern Appalachians, Sunday night into Monday. And then it pushes off to the east, bringing with it snow across portions of the mid-Atlantic, Carolina, Piedmont, southeastern Virginia as well. So there is that surface low. Right now, as of this morning, that surface low is in central Arkansas. Here is that enhanced risk that does nose into southeastern Kentucky, northwestern Alabama, northern Mississippi. So it definitely has been compressed a little bit off to the north. And I wonder how this will modify with time. May want to extend that enhanced risk just a little bit off to the south into central Alabama especially with that HRRR showing some of those renegades moving into that area. Hatch area for strong tornadoes, 10% hatch area, includes Memphis, northern Mississippi, includes Jackson, Tennessee, Nashville as well. Just near Bowling Green, you are in that tornado threat as well. Those areas that were impacted by those tornadoes, that hatch area does extend into eastern Tennessee, northwestern Alabama as well. I am a little bit surprised that it wasn't upgraded to moderate given the trends up with the HRRR, but an enhanced more than reasonably captures this threat as well. And there's that surface low, at least according to the RAP analysis, that subtle surface low that is over Memphis, Tennessee right now. It is possible that the surface low is moving just a little bit fast, and then the surface winds are going to veer back behind it a bit. And there you can see the RAP developing those renegades across northwestern Alabama, northeastern Mississippi, into middle Tennessee, including that Nashville area. This is the RAP analysis that we are looking at here. Let's take a look at the evolution of that low-level wind shear. Not surprising, the strongest wind shear right now, just ahead of that surface low across western Tennessee. In about 4 hours from now, that wind shear pushes east to middle Tennessee, northeastern Mississippi, northwestern Alabama, about 200 to 300, 0 to 1 kilometer shear. Definitely supportive of that tornado threat, even across northwestern Alabama, middle Tennessee, especially across northwestern Alabama into middle Tennessee. So my plan is to head up to Hamilton and then chase that corridor from Hamilton up to Nashville. There, Hamilton, Alabama, northwestern portion of the state, possibly up into middle Tennessee. Definitely time for me to hit the road and head northwest to intercept this tornado event. Definitely does appear that that corridor across northwestern Alabama, northeastern Mississippi into middle Tennessee, pushing into eastern Tennessee and southeastern Kentucky as we go through the day is going to be that main corridor for convection and tornado potential. So I'm going to be streaming live this event. Stay tuned to those warnings by people that are able to sit in front of a computer, sit in a studio, and just break down radar for hours after hour. They're able to keep an eye on these storms, keep an eye on the radar and a multitude of storms. While I'm storm chasing, I do try to keep an eye on the radar the best that I can, but sometimes I get in some data holes that are out there as well. But here you can see this line, a little subtle surface low over the Memphis area. But I'm going to be watching for the development of these storms down maybe near the Grenada area, southeast of there, and south near Tupelo. And I do expect these to track over this northwestern Alabama location. Russellville, Florence, Lawrenceburg, Nashville, all of these locations throughout this zone. The classic zone that often gets impacted by these big tornado events. So definitely stay tuned to these watches and warnings, everybody. I'll be live streaming this entire event as well. Thank you for riding along in my passenger seat over these last 3 years as we've been storm chasing. And stay safe out there, everybody. Stay tuned to those severe weather watches and warnings and dominate the storm.